You're listening to Contesting Wrestling Minisode 10, dropping on Friday, December 13th, 2019. We've now recorded between the main episodes, the premium episodes, and the minisodes. You could now listen to Contesting Wrestling for 24 straight hours. Actually, I think maybe even a little more than that. I'm not sure. That's a real benchmark for us.
Yeah.
Let's see. In that 24 hours, we have spent 470 million hours watching Hulk Hogan matches. Is what it feels like. Especially today, we just wrapped up recording a premium episode that accompanies the first main feed episode for Hulk Hogan, and I was watching some today, and my brain was firmly rejecting it.
So now you have a pretty good idea of what it was like to be a wrestling fan in the 80s and 90s when Hogan was ubiquitous.
Man, it's just like the constant shoving of him in your face, which even if you like the guy, even if you're a fan, like, it's just too much.
You can kind of see why the people got behind Goldberg when they thought that he was going to be the one to not only dethrone Hogan, but maybe for good.
Like, take his place.
I never thought I'd say this, but friend of the show, William J. Goldberg. I now understand why people might have been a little more attached to him. Still like Hulk Hogan better, I think, than Goldberg.
Also, you're not seeing. You saw a few, but like, you'd be seeing way more Hogan promos if you had been a fan at the time, and those are much better than the matches.
True.
Just him screaming about everything.
I do think if Hogan had been more prominent when I was first getting into wrestling, as opposed to, like, he was kind of out of the picture, at least momentarily, and Bret Hart was the top guy, I don't think it would have hooked me quite as much if it had just been Hogan all the time. Bret Hart, because what I really got hooked on was the wrestling aspect, the technical wrestling, and that was what Bret was doing. And that you don't really get that from Hogan. So a couple of things. First, I wanted to refer back to an earlier minisode where
we are soon going to start doing the tiny sodes,
the microsodes,
where we're going to be reflecting on each minisode, and then we'll do the picosodes where we reflect on the microsode.
Yeah.
And then those will be behind the paywall. The nanosodes,
those will just be on TikTok.
as well as the premium minisodes, those will be behind the paywall. And then we'll make a new $10 tier for you to hear the picosode reviews.
Oh yeah. If we ever make a lot of money on Patreon, we'll force Evan to watch Nitro until its conclusion.
So support us so you can one day hear that.
Oh God.
I hope that happens. You don't.
No.
You hope we make the money and I forget about it.
Look, man, if I don't have to fucking get a day job again, then I'll do listeners, I'll do anything you want me to do. Okay, I'm saying if you want to set up the Patreon, if enough money comes in, I will do anything to not have to go back to retail or data entry. I'll do while sucking your.
It's again, better than working the day job, right?
It is actually better than
it's.
That's something I don't understand about how, like, people who are very judgmental of people who do sex work, because, like, if you have waited tables in your life, I don't understand how anybody who's ever waited tables and had, like, a shitty boss has not had a moment to themselves where they're like, you know what, like, I suck 3 strange dicks a week and make the same amount of money, and then fucking feel like, I don't know, you probably wouldn't feel worse than you would at some jobs waiting tables.
George Carlin once said of the activity, men do it, women do it, can't be that bad if everybody's doing it.
I follow Jacques the Stripper on Instagram.
Oh yes, as do I. Yeah.
JACQ, and she has some great cartoons and just comments about the industry where she makes that point all the time. Like,
Yeah.
you who is sitting there judging me for, dancing and erotically for a living are doing something much more shameful by spending all of your hours working for some horrible company that's exploiting people and
Yeah.
producing crap. Or not, or just moving money around or whatever.
Yeah,
Well-
not even producing anything.
Well, that's why I think I think part of why now it seems to be entering the public consciousness a bit, and like having a real conversation about respecting sex work and understanding that it's a part of society. But I think a big part of what kept us from dealing with it for so long, obviously it's America's, demented, repressed sexual mores and that kind of thing. But a big part of it is also like, if you start looking at it too closely, you start thinking a lot about your own job. And you start
Yeah.
being like, oh, maybe this isn't radically. And a little while ago, I read an article written by Lorelei Lee. How, she's like, look, there's this perception that, we're either all like completely empowered who are doing this, for our own independence, or there's a perspective that we're all trafficked victims. But she's like, really, in my experience, it's not that different from, have you ever just gotten stuck at a job? Or have you ever like developed a skill and then you just get kind of stuck doing that and you have complex feelings about it? And maybe sometimes you like it and maybe other times it's the worst thing you've ever done in your life. But it's like the
But
thing
you're
that
good enough at it to make a living, so
it is. And as somebody who has been trapped in a cycle of like retail and service jobs my whole life, yeah, I fucking totally get that.
Speaking of professional wrestling, which I think
Yeah.
that was a really good point that Darren Aronofsky made in The Wrestler, the similarities in many ways between wrestling and sex work. You're using your body to make money. You are doing it in an industry where you're not really profiting nearly as much off of it as the people who are putting the show on. You're often maybe going to do it longer than you should because, again, you get stuck in it. Yeah.
You're only as valuable as you are young and strong.
Right. Yeah.
And then one day you find yourself older and weaker, but you need that job and it's paying less and it's harder to find work.
So you might have to do work that you wouldn't
Right.
have done earlier.
Like a hardcore match with Necro Butcher, for example.
Right.
And yeah, these two fields are probably the best examples of worker exploitation that I could think of, that anybody could think of.
And they're ones that are not as respected by general
Yep.
society as
Yeah.
they should be, which is part of why we're doing this podcast in the case of wrestling.
Oh yeah, we take wrestling seriously. Seriously does not mean boring, but we take wrestling. We're looking at it objectively. We are contesting it a little bit. Wrestling is currently on the precipice of something great. There's a different kind of boom happening. A lot of new fans are coming in for the first time in 20 years. A lot of new fans are coming in. They're not coming in and watching the WWE. WWE has their fans, fine. But a lot of new people are coming in. So let's move the whole culture forward, the whole wrestling culture, every part of it. We're going to do our little part over here.
So speaking of exploitation,
Yeah.
the thing I wanted to reference from the earlier minisode
Yeah.
was this horrible incident where the Kevin Sullivan had the trained monkey and he accidentally killed it.
Oh, no.
This was confirmed. There is video, if you look for it, of Kevin Sullivan telling the story. So that did, in fact, happen.
That's a bad thing.
Yeah. Also, speaking of
Poor
the
monkey.
wrestler, so, a big part of the 80s generation of wrestlers was drug use. And we talked a little bit about it during this Hogan episode about, speculating on who did what drugs. The famous story was that Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik got caught in a car when they were feuding. Iron Sheik was the evil Iranian, who hated the U.S., and Hacksaw Jim Duggan was the big USA guy. Got caught smoking crack together in a car. Now, that's not, according to Hacksaw, they were like smoking weed, and maybe there was like a little cocaine in there or whatever. But that was the story that went around. That was sort of emblematic of the time period. The real problem with it was that they were breaking kayfabe.
Yeah,
by
they
hanging
were
out
riding together. Like, that was a big no-no. It's like, okay, whatever we say this is, maybe you guys don't get arrested in the same car when you're going to the arenas and talking about how much you hate each other, and that's the whole basis of why we're selling tickets.
Luckily, they had the excuse that they were just so high on crack that they couldn't recognize each other. And there's how did we even get here in the first place?
And, that's how we can have peace between our nation and others. We can all just smoke crack together.
Yeah.
No,
well,
no, I think
free-based cocaine. Crack's got a lot of extra stuff in it, but yeah.
Or or maybe just weed.
Maybe.
Yeah,
That
actually,
might
really
actually
just, yes.
work. Yeah.
In all seriousness, don't do cocaine. You're supporting the worst people on earth when you do it.
As the Bone Thugs say, if everyone could smoke a blunt, relieve the mind, the world would be a better place. If everybody took a break and we all just got wasted.
I mean,
Wow.
yeah, that's
The wise men from Cleveland, the Bone Thugs, in harmony. I would say end, but it's not end. It's in harmony.
Speaking of kayfabe, we were talking about how, a couple of things about the movie industry, how Hogan wanted to do movies and Vince Sr. wasn't down with the wrestler doing movies, and how it was very important for the older guard to sort of protect the business. And I watched a really interesting clip with Al Snow talking about how protecting the business wasn't so much about protecting the illusion that it was real. I mean, that was definitely part of it, but it was more protecting the jobs of the guys who made a living off of it by trying to make it seem like not everyone could just do it.
Was there a fear that, like, if word got out that it wasn't real, like, people just wouldn't be interested?
Well, it's not even a question of whether or not it was real. It's like Kevin Nash talked about, breaking in. How one of the things that, like, he thought he was really lucky that he had a couple of people that helped him break in, because if he just showed up, people would think, oh, that guy's 7 feet tall and jacked. He's going to get a job. Might be my job. Let's chase him off.
So, yeah, you had to be a tough guy, not just because you had to win a bar fight, but because there had to be some kind of standard for who got in and who got to make money. Or else, there had to be the illusion that, guy off the street couldn't just go and do it. Yeah. And I guess a lot of it didn't look particularly skilled also.
Yeah.
So there had to be at least something to it that not everybody could do.
Is wrestling, at least at the time, was it more of a of a nepotism kind of thing? Like, did you have to know somebody? Did you have to be in the boys' club?
That really
helped.
It's still like to this day, it's very much a mom and pop business. It's much easier to get in if you have family in.
Sure.
They can help you.
But what Snow talked about was there weren't wrestling schools, really. You found someone who would break you in.
Yeah, someone who was willing to train you enough. But at the time, your education still largely happened in the ring during matches. Because with so many territories, if you got in, it was easier to get a full-time bottom-level job just working the loop, doing the bottom matches on the territories. You would get paid badly, but enough to get to the next town. And, then you do that 6 days a week. You get good at wrestling.
Yeah. And Snow was actually sort of bemoaning the development of the wrestling schools because they started bringing too many people into the business, where it used to be more like, I don't know, a wrestler would befriend someone at the gym who had a really good body or something like that and be like, hey, you could probably do this. And then they break them in that way.
Someone could see you and think, I can make money with you. Let's get you in this. I have encountered people in wrestling schools who will straight up admit that they didn't realize they had to be athletic. So things have changed a lot. And when I first started at Johnny Rods' school, I was not athletic at all, but I knew that was going to have to change, and that was going to be difficult. And do we need to get the dog out of here?
She's not doing any.
You can't hear her tail hitting the
I mean,
chair?
you can hear it a little bit, but it's sort of endearing.
All right, that's fine.
Guest appearance by Pepper the dog.
Yeah, and
Under-
then
under a
she's
table.
just she's
Guest
under the
appearance,
table
yeah,
doing
cool.
all kinds. Who knows what sort of mischief now.
But yeah, there is definitely now after, and this changed not that long ago. Like some of my first trainers at Johnny's school were telling me about how when they broke in, they still presumed that it was just real and they were going to go there and they had to be told, stop actually wrestling the guys to the ground so hard. You got to let them in. This is how it works. And so just over the span of one generation, it went from a very insular business that was very hard to get in to a business where seemingly everybody has a school now and it's easier than ever to just get in the ring in the first place. And some would say that it has gotten too easy, and there's not nothing to that. Kind of has gotten too easy just to do it. But now that there's such a huge flood of people entering, only the people that can do it or have a catchy act will rise.
But
anyway,
there is a kind of democratization to it where there was definitely gatekeeping that wasn't just about talent.
Certainly.
And yeah, with anything like that, with any proliferation like that, there's going to be a period of time where there's probably a lot of bullshit, but there will be new standards will emerge for what's going to get over.
I mean, I imagine the only real downside of a huge flood of people coming in is that you might have like a higher percentage of people who are sloppy and wind up like injuring somebody else.
Yes, and that is a problem.
Like that to me, that's like the fact that it might create some wrestling that's not good. It's like, I hate to tell you this, but that's a problem that wrestling has been dealing with for quite some time,
and has been dealing with the other problem too
Yeah.
of sloppy workers. So
Well, one of the problems now at schools is that if you're running a school for profit, you don't want to go up to somebody who's been doing it for just a couple of months and say, look, I've been watching how you move your body and how you're progressing, and I really don't think this is for you. You're going to hurt yourself or somebody else. Or maybe you want to do an auxiliary role, but I really don't think you should be here doing this, because then you don't get paid by the guy.
Well, and that seems to be like, something that, like that's not something like, comedy schools will take your money forever. If you go to a martial arts thing, they'll take your money forever or something like that. But there is a point where morally the right thing to do is to pull somebody aside and say, like, you shouldn't fucking be doing this in wrestling.
It's an interesting thing with the martial arts example because, some people do that just for fun.
Yeah.
Like, just as like a hobby to like get some exercise, learn some self-discipline. I mean, we do it with kids, right? We send kids to karate classes.
Yeah, it's
stuff
not
like
about
that.
learning how to punch. It's learning how to, control yourself.
And I wonder if wrestling could ever be something like that just people just... Because pretty much if you join a wrestling school, even now, at least part of you is thinking of it as a potential career. Right.
Well, if you're with a school that's attached to a league, which many of them are right now, you're expected to work ring crew for that league. You're expected to put as much time as possible into the build-up of the collective in that school. And if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to get that far in the school because people are going to think you're not serious enough to want to get booked on shows. And if all you really want to do is roll around, most students consider you to be in the way.
Right, yeah, they don't want you there.
Wrestling seems like a lousy hobby.
You might not want to get a WWE contract and work 4 nights a week, right? But you might want to, work shows on the weekends.
Yeah, you might want to just take Saturday bookings and, rest the rest of the time at your house and have a 9-to-5 job otherwise. A lot of guys, especially now in the business, do that, and there's nothing wrong with that because there isn't that much money out there to be made on an individual basis.
Only the very few. I mean, Doc, when you started training...
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure somewhere in your mind you thought it would be awesome if I got a WWE contract.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But was that a realistic goal for you?
It was never my goal to go to the WWE. I don't really fit there. I don't really fit what they do, per se, and I don't feel like molding myself to that. I'm happy that there are so many other paths forward now, especially that I've been doing more commentary, even for that with the WWE. I don't want to go to the WWE and put on a suit and say all their catchphrases and be another clone of Michael Cole. Come on.
Have Vince yelling in your ear the entire time you're commentating over the match.
Hell with that, man. I do commentary for a couple of groups. They trust me. They like what I do, and I'm happy about that.
I I'd love to have a creative role in
Yeah.
wrestling if that were possible, but I wouldn't want to be on the WWE writing team.
No.
It's completely thankless.
You and 4 dozen other guys who all have English degrees and a couple of improv classes under their belt, hoping that whatever they say won't get them fired this week because they're all so disposable.
Churning out ideas that maybe even if they pick your idea, they're going to warp it into something unrecognizable.
Vince is going to come by the day of the show and tear up your script and say, "Give me another script before tonight."
Also on the wrestler Hollywood thing, of all the promoters, Vern Gagne not only was okay with wrestlers doing movies, but made his own movie called The Wrestler in the 70s, starring who else but Vern Gagne.
So I want to point something out about The Wrestler from the 70s, a completely different movie than the Oscar-nominated The Wrestler from last decade. So Vern Gagne made this movie starring himself and some of the other wrestlers of the day. You can see a very young Ric Flair in one of the scenes, Dusty Rhodes, Dick Murdoch. The AWA did not have the same killer schedule as many of the other territories. The AWA would straight up take a month and a half, 2 months off in the winter because they ran Minnesota to Milwaukee to Chicago, and they were like, let's just take some time off. The drives weren't as long as other territories. They'd work maybe 3 nights a week instead of 6 when they were on. So they had more time to go shoot a movie if they were going to go shoot a movie than like for Vince McMahon Sr., where he would run shows 7 days a week. So if his top guy was on 6 of them and then said, well, for the next like 3 or 4 weeks, I'm going to LA and shoot a movie, he has no top guy for weeks of arena shows that his business needs to fill to keep the business model moving.
It's by no means a great movie, but it is a sort of interesting document of that time in the wrestling industry. And they do sort of reference, people who think that it's fake, or in an interesting, in a strange kind of half in, half out kind of way.
Well, Gagne's character fully recognizes that what you have to do is get over with the crowd. Of course, he's portrayed as somebody who will win all the time. Anyway, but yeah, that part is addressed. Oh, also starring Ed Asner. Yeah. I figure I should mention that. He's actually the guy that gets top billing in the movie.
And Billy Robinson is the other wrestler
Billy
who's
Robinson.
In it. We meant, just for people who don't know, we mentioned Andre the Giant's great film role. We didn't mention the name of the film. It's The Princess Bride. Fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Andre's
great in it.
So full disclosure, I had only ever seen bits and pieces of The Princess Bride.
Right.
Like I'd only ever seen it out of I had never seen it when I was a kid for reasons I don't think I could explain.
Just
I feel like I
didn't
saw
pass in
every
front of
other
you.
yeah. So I only saw it for the first time like maybe in the last 2 years. We went and saw somebody was doing a screening of it at the theater downtown. Cool. And I kind of went in like, all right, like this will be cool. A lot of times when I've seen other classic films from the 80s, it hasn't really held up for me. I'm like, oh, I can see why this was good at the time. Still great. It's a fucking great movie.
Yeah, it's timeless.
Like, it is an actually timeless. I feel like 30 years from now, you could show it to kids and it'll still be fucking
It's a fairy
fantastic.
tale.
Yeah.
It's full on a fairy tale. It works on every level. Just great. And everyone in it is great. They all take it just seriously enough, without making it like a heavy slog.
So we also talked about the iconic body slam of Hulk Hogan on Andre the Giant at the WrestleMania 3 match, and how they replay it all the time. WWE at the beginning of every single one of their shows has a kind of signature montage, and it has like a weird jingle to it. It's a clearly neuro-linguistic programming. It usually says something like WWE now and forever, and it's just reinforcing their fucking brand in your head. They took it out for a little while when Hogan was under fire for his racist comments, but it's back in. It is the very first thing you see in that signature, the body slam.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
at the top of every show they produce.
And the signature is made up of dozens of like half-second clips. I think the body slam gets slightly longer just to get the pull up and the around. And they change it every couple of weeks based on who's on the roster, who's getting pushed. Not even who's on the roster, but who's in the good graces of the company. You know, somebody leaves the company, you'll immediately see them taken off of it and replaced by somebody who's there. It's a very interesting, like just watching all the different ones of them over the years is an interesting exercise in what their psychology is and how they're educating the audience to whatever they're trying to educate you to. Because if you leave the WWE, there really isn't any beef, but you don't exist if you work full-time for another wrestling company.
It used to be that if you were not currently in the company, they would never mention you.
Unless the only person they'd mentioned was Andre the Giant.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned to me earlier that CM Punk in his famous pipe bomb promo.
Yeah. I'm not in the signature at the top of this program, I believe is the quote.
Yeah.
When he was listing his grievances about, you should see this one promo is the thing that shot him into the stratosphere. They just, gave him the mic. He was going to leave in a month there and gave him the mic and said, just list your grievances. We'll cut you off eventually. And he goes under the ramp and for 7 minutes, he's just like, I'm better than all these guys. You don't merchandise me. You don't send me to talk. Come on, John Cena, really? And like, it really resonated.
When we do a Punk episode,
Yeah,
we'll
show you
watch
the
it. We'll
Punk.
probably watch the Punk Cena match.
Oh, that's probably peak of them, the WWE. All downhill from there.
Also on the body slam for months afterwards, because Bobby Heenan was disputing the finish to that match, and he was also disputing the body slam. He'd be like, "Oh, it was just a hip toss."
Right.
Which actually would have been much harder for Andre to pull off, I think.
Yes, but if you're thinking about like fighting, a hip toss is easier because you're using momentum. You can hip toss somebody much larger than you in judo because it's their weight, whereas picking up somebody over your head and slamming them to the ground, picking up 950-pound Andre the Giant and sending him directly through the floor at the Pontiac Silverdome that held 450,000 people.
Did he really weigh 950 pounds? No.
But every time Hogan tells the
impossible,
story, Andre gets a little heavier and the Silverdome gets a little bigger.
By the way, I said 93,000 some odd people was the official number they gave. I know damn well it was 93,173. That shit was burned into my memory.
They said that number over and over years because it was the biggest crowd that they ever made up.
I was trying to play down that I was so brainwashed.
Andre probably, if I had to guess, probably weighed about 450 to 500 pounds. And he probably was a little shorter than his peak height here because he got shorter as he got older because his organs kept growing and stuff. He was probably 7'1" or something.
So I got one last piece of ugliness. So we didn't go into the whole Mega Powers storyline. I mean, quickly, Randy Savage became the champion at WrestleMania 4. Hogan and Liz started hanging out more. They were a tag team, Savage and Hogan. There was the jealousy because Savage thought that Hogan was trying to take Liz from him.
Hogan, you got lust in your eyes for Elizabeth. I saw it.
Yeah. And so then Savage turns bad and they have the match and Hogan wins the title and Savage eventually loses to the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 7 and reunites with Elizabeth, and that's the whole thing. And so we were like, oh, not too long ago they stopped having storylines with male wrestlers fighting over over women in general, whether wrestlers or not, as trophies. Unfortunately, we have returned to such things, as we've already mentioned, but we had to do it again because this episode was recorded months ago. The Hogan episode was recorded months ago, and these sorts of storylines have returned to WWE television in the form of Bobby Lashley and Rusev fighting over Lana in just the worst possible way. I don't know what didn't see Raw this week. What's the most recent development?
I don't know. I'm not watching this.
No.
Like really, I'm not. I haven't watched Raw. I catch the important highlights afterwards. I usually find that I miss very little. I might watch TLC out of habit mostly.
I'll probably go to Wilkins of the Jobber Tears.
Yeah.
podcast
Shout out to
TLC
Jobber
party on
Tears, yeah.
Sunday.
Those guys are great.
Do you see what's going on between Wilkins and Darius Carter?
What is that? Because I've been seeing something happening.
It looks to me like, and
Yeah.
I think I've seen the same things you did.
Yeah.
That there's this promotion that runs in New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
One for All or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
And Wilkins, who is a podcaster who has trained wrestling a little bit
All
over
right.
the last year at House of Glory, has challenged Darius Carter, who is an established independent wrestler,
Yeah.
to a match.
Okay.
And Darius Carter is like, you are not a wrestler. You are a fan and a podcaster. You are getting in way over your head, and I'm going to hurt you.
All right.
But it looks like they've booked the match.
Cool. All right.
So
go for it.
we'll see what happens to Wilkins. I'd like to see it.
I'm
I
sure
hope
he'll
he
eventually
does
be
well.
fine.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if he dies in that match, we should claim as many of his fans as we possibly can, because they're clearly going to have a big podcast-shaped hole in their life.
That's an excellent point.
So that's my contribution to this.
I mean, they have a couple other hosts, so they can probably keep going with that.
Well, we'll have to get some other indie guys
Yeah.
on that.
We'll have to
Yeah.
murder those other hosts.
Yes.
Um,
No, none of that. Jobber Tears is cool.
They're
Yeah.
thumbs up on those
yeah,
guys.
good luck, Wilkins.
If we're getting stuff in, I want to plug the next XSW show.
Oh yeah.
As next Wednesday, it is a different day for us. It is Wednesday, December 18th. It's going to be at the Pit Striker, which is not the Pit Loft. It is a different pit venue. It's the bigger one. It's going to be at 9:30 p.m., not 11. So that's going to help. It's going to be a lot of fun, as always. Come check that out if you're in Manhattan. Even if you're not, come into Manhattan. Take public transportation. Don't drive in. Seriously, don't drive in. And I'd like to plug our Patreon page. If you like what we do and then you enjoy our episode and our Minisode every week, we do another full episode every single week on Patreon. We currently have, 9 up? I think we'll have 10 up within...
Next week, episode 10 is going
Next
up.
week, episode 10 is going up. So as of the release of this, we have 9 full episodes you can unlock if you join our Patreon at the $5 tier. If you help support us do this, we can do it better and do it more. Which is what we just want to do anyway. It better and more. Thank you.
Yeah, as I was saying up top, we've now got like 24 hours plus worth of material. And if you want to consume all of that, you'd have to sign up for the Patreon.
Try to eat while you do it.
Yeah, try.
You can put on headphones, go jogging, whatever.
You can do all sorts of things.
Also,
you could have sex while listening to us talk.
you could do that.
I could do so many things with my own bare hands.
And if what we were talking about earlier happens, you might be able to have sex with Evan while listening to him talk.
That's entirely possible. Although
For the right price.
I find the sound
Everybody's got a price.
find the sound of my own voice to be deeply unsexy. At least, I mean, I get maybe other people enjoy it, but I feel like if I heard myself while I was fucking, that would be terrible.
I have at least one friend. Well, I have one friend who lost his virginity to one of my to our album.
Really?
To the first album.
Oh no!
That we recorded.
Oh no! Oh god! Ben and I were in the worst band anybody's ever heard when we were 15. I guess not. I guess there were other. There were
worse bands.
There were
There's
worse
we
bands.
were bad,
always worse bands.
Yeah.
Come on. There's always worse bands.
There's
And they all played at a festival I went to once.
there's going to be a bunch of cool extra stuff coming to the Patreon in 2020 as well,
Yeah.
including a mini series we're trying to plan and some other stuff. So it'll be an exciting time for $5 a month.
Yeah, we got a lot of ideas. We're just getting started.
Yeah. All right. We love you. Thank you so much for listening. Follow us on Twitter at ContestingW. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/contestingwrestling. We will see you soon.